Okay, this is KPFK Los Angeles, and we are on the air live as of July 1990 with Robert Anton Wilson, who is the author of 2 more books, Quantum Psychology, and the thin one, and Masks of the Illuminati, which is the thicker one. Welcome back to the program.
Nice to be back here again.
I got these 2 books in the mail, and Quantum Psychology's it's less than 192 pages. I thought I'd sort of fly through this one in a couple of days. I'm a slow reader, and then I'd hit the Masks of the Illuminati, which is a novel. It is a novel. And well, Quantum Psychology is it's
a kind of a novel. Masks.
Quantum novel.
Funny speaking about masks. When you paused after you said it's a novel, like you were asking a question.
Well, it's
it's a post-Joycean novel or postmodern. There's a book called Postmodern Fiction, and I find I'm in there. So I'm a postmodernist, even though I never planned to be.
So there's a new place for you to be in the bookstores. So
yes, postmodernism.
Robert Anton Wilson, they never know where to put his books. He's under occult, he's under New Age, he's under science fiction, he's under novels, and I guess he's under postmodern now. So every bookstore has their own solution to the problem of where Robert Anton Wilson belongs. I guess some people would say that you do not even belong in a bookstore because you're too...
Some people think I belong behind bars. Yeah, the latest issue of the Skeptical Inquirer. Have you ever heard of that?
I brought here. I was going to bring it up myself. I didn't see the issue, but I got this ad. I was going to.
Oh, it's the funniest magazine in the country. And in the latest issue, they.
Buckley's magazine is advertising itself as the funniest magazine in the country.
They have a letter by Robert Schaefer in which he compares me to a terrorist. He says, like a terrorist, Wilson launches unprovoked attacks on thought and language, and then slinks back into the dark under the cover of a belly laugh. Now, you don't get to see writing like that very often. He should have said slinks back into the dark like a snake in the grass, hiding behind a belly laugh to conceal his monkey business. But I mean, this guy's a master of bad prose. But I love it. I love it. Yeah, you don't get that kind of... I'm going to use that on the jacket of every book from now on if I can talk my publishers into it. Wouldn't you want to read a writer who, like a terrorist, leaps from the dark to launch unprovoked attacks on your language and thought? I mean, how can you grow?
It doesn't sound boring.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me sound not only exciting, but faintly sinister. What better reputation can a writer have?
But you're no more sinister than quantum physics or general semantics or stuff that's been going on for decades. I mean, you're not just some kind of wild individual terrorist that's running around tearing things out. You're trying to bring...
I appear a terrorist to those who are unfamiliar with the history of 20th century science.
And you'd say the Cyclops are like that.
Well, the Cyclop, it sounds like Cyclops.
I call them Cyclops.
It's sort of a one-eyed view of the world, you know.
Talking to them, trying to explain reality to the Cyclops is like... to the Cyclopean mind is like trying to explain depth perception to a Cyclops.
Exactly. They have this...
They don't believe it happens.
They have this 19th century view of the world, and they're at war with modern science, and they call themselves the Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, and they never done any scientific investigation in their whole career except one. They did a statistical study of astrology. It tended to confirm astrology, so they changed the figures.
Sounds like the agriculture department.
The guy who wrote the study is an astronomer named Dennis Rawlins. He quit Psychop over that. They not only can change the figures, they prevented him from 2 years from not telling in the magazine that they had changed the figures to make it come out the way they wanted. They have about as much concept of scientific method as they have of Etruscan poetry.
But they have some very top scientists on their board. Is it the board? Carl Sagan. And there's billions and billions of scientists here. But he's not. I mean, he's in the forefront, right? B.F. Skinner. Ugh. And I don't know, Philip Klass. I've heard the name. Murray Gell-Mann. Stephen Jay Gould. These are all fellows.
The majority of members of PsyCop are not scientists. There's a sociological study of PsyCop that I've got at home. The membership is almost all male, almost all white, almost all middle-aged to geriatric, and almost all non-scientists.
Sounds like a familiar kind of grouping. Well, you...
Sounds like the Libertarian Party. That was nasty, wasn't it?
Oh, we're going to hit on everybody tonight. You are a psychologist. This book, Quantum Psychology, is very thoroughgoing and very intense. It's filled with exercises. This book is really made for group. It's kind of a group therapy experience with a lot of these exercises.
It's a manual for group adventures in discovering their own minds and the group mind.
Well, it's very. I found it slow going and very interesting, but not a quick read. I'm kind of sorry I didn't read The Masks of the Illuminati first, because I've only gotten part way through, but it goes pretty fast. Starting off with Einstein having coffee with James Joyce.
Beer.
A beer, that's right. Einstein. It's Einstein.
Well, Joyce couldn't resist that. Joyce sort of collaborated with me on the book.
So, apart from the books, what is happening? What's going on with reality nowadays? Terence said things are getting better and better and worse at the same time.
Well, they're certainly getting weirder and weirder. I'm putting out a newsletter now, my own newsletter. It's called Trajectories, which I co-edit with my wife, Arlen, and D. Scott Appel. And we're trying to cover the fantastic evolutionary changes that are occurring. Every issue astonishes me as much as it astonishes the reader. So many new things have happened since the last issue. I did a series on the evolutionary trajectories that you can find if you contemplate the Earth as a living organism growing from the beginning to the present. And before I finished the series, the whole communist world started transforming itself into something else. The Berlin Wall came down. The white supremacist government of South Africa started negotiating with the ANC. The Russians confessed that they did the Katyn Forest massacre, not the Nazis. The East German government took responsibility for the Holocaust. Nelson Mandela admitted the ANC has used torture. There was the sudden outbreak of honesty. Well, Corrigan also, I thought any time the Pope might get up and announce I'm not infallible, and as a celibate, I don't have any advice for married people at all. What do I know from that? Or George Bush might get up and say, yeah, I've been dealing coke for 20 years and I've made a pile out of it. Har, har, har. But the honesty didn't spread quite that far.
Well, you think maybe the West has gone east and the East has gone west, and we're looking for models of freedom to Romania and Yugoslavia and Hungary now, where people have taken action and they've put on the cloak of freedom, which is eternal vigilance, and they're throwing the rascals out. And here we have these pig heads that are spraying us with poison and putting us in. They're planning to put us in concentration camps and the phony drug war, and there's a lot of bad news. So, a lot of people getting ready to move to Eastern Europe, where you can have some freedom and democracy.
I lived in Europe for 6 years, and I frequently get a strong urge to go back when I see what's coming down in this country. And when we've reached the point where a guy is nominated for the Supreme Court on the sole grounds that he can't offend anybody in an election year, this is the only qualification he seems to have, is that nobody knows anything about him. Why didn't they just put a cardboard cutout up there, you know? What do they need a live man for if his whole function is to be nothing? Trudeau has been symbolizing George Bush in Doonesbury for some years now as nothing. For a while he changed it to nothing with an American flag wrapped around it. But Souter seems to be nothing with more nothing wrapped around it. And it's his whole qualification. Nobody knows where he stands on anything. And to carry politics that far, that the selection of one of the 9 most important jobs in the government is based just on totally cynical political considerations. I mean, that's pretty low even for George Bush.
But who are the great attorneys now? I mean, you look at the history of law and you figure, which I almost went into, and you see the great figures, Learned Hand and Clarence Darrow and Oliver Wendell Holmes. And nowadays, outside of, say, Ralph Nader and Dan Sheehan and a couple of others, there's the profession of the law has really lost its respectability, and it's now...
Lawyer jokes are, they're fantastically popular all across the country. You know, they're not using, they're using lawyers instead of rats at the National Science Laboratory now. 4 reasons. Animal rights activists don't care what happens to lawyers. Laboratory technicians do not develop emotional bonds to lawyers. There are more lawyers than rats in Washington, and there are some things you can't get a rat to do. There are hundreds of these lawyer jokes now.
Well, how can we get help from the Illuminati?
The fully informed juror amendment.
And what is that?
It's on the ballot in 22 states by now. It's an attempt to get an amendment to the Constitution which would require that judges inform juries of a right that juries have had ever since Magna Carta, which has been repeatedly upheld by the courts, including Oliver Wendell Holmes in one memorable decision, and which, for some strange reason, nobody ever thought to write into the law that juries have to be told they have this right. And the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in one decision that although juries have this right, the judge does not have to inform them that they have this right, and the judge can actively prevent the defense counsel from telling them they have this right.
The judge can prevent the defense counsel from telling the jury their rights.
Exactly. That's the way the law currently stands. They did not overturn the tradition which goes back to Magna Carta. By the way, I haven't defined that right, have I?
Not yet.
The right is that they don't have to convict if they think it's a bad law. The juries have the right to judge the law as well as the facts. And any judge who tells them anything to the contrary is meddling with the jury illegally, misleading them, and can be overturned in an appeal to a higher court under the precedents that exist.
And then the higher court deals with the law that the juries rejected. The jury that
yes,
rejected.
the law still exists that juries can throw out any law that is repugnant to them. This was written into the Magna Carta so that the king and his associates could not pass any damn law they wanted and inflict it on the people. The people always had this one final check against tyranny and bad laws, which was they did not have to convict. They could just ignore the law if the majority of the community genuinely detests it, or even a small part of the community in some places. That's why jurors are selected at random. That's a very important part of the whole jury tradition, at random, which means you get a cross-section of the community. You get as close as you can scientifically get to a genuine sample of how what the community's ideas, morals, and general standards are. And anything that goes against their conscience, they do not have to vote approval of it.
Now, I'm thinking, let me see, the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. So if you're convicted for speeding on the freeway, you can ask for a jury trial and then appeal to the jury on the basis of the supposed unsatisfactoriness of the law. And then it goes to a higher court.
Well, you can't tell the jury that they can overturn the law as it presently stands. The law is full of paradoxes, and the paradox is they have that right, but you can't tell them they have that right within the court. If they don't know it coming in, they can't learn it there. So one good thing about the fully informed jury amendment is that even if it never passes, all the publicity it's generating means more and more people will know their rights when they go into the jury box. I have the impression from shows I've heard that you don't approve of anti-marijuana laws.
Oh no, they're offensive to nature.
Well, if you're called for jury duty and you go down there and the judge tells you if you find the facts prove this man had a joint in his possession, you must sentence him to prison. You must find him guilty at least. You don't have to do that. The judge is misinforming you. You have the right to tell the rest of the jury, I think the law stinks and I vote not to enforce it. So you could have a hung jury very easily. The more people who know that, the more hung juries there'll be, and the less laws that can be enforced, except the ones that everybody feels unnecessary and desirable, like the law against killing and picking pockets.
So the fully informed jury amendment would, allow the judge to...
It would force the judge.
Force the judge.
It would order all judges to tell all juries that they have the right to nullify the law if the law goes against their conscience.
So that's part of the judge's instructions to the jury.
Maryland already has this. They've had it forever. Under the Maryland state constitution, every judge has to begin the trial by telling the jury they have that right.
Now, how much of the Magna Carta is reflected in our Constitution? If you say,
quite a bit of it.
So if you say this goes back to the Magna Carta, that takes that pulls legal, morally at least legal weight by going back to that document, which took away rights from the divine right of the king. And gave it some.
That was the first step in reducing the king back to a human being, which he always was. But there was a long period in which lasted much longer on the continent than it did in England. There was a long period in which kings actually got away with persuading people that they were something other and greater than human. The Pharaoh of Egypt was supposed to be the sun god, the Mikado. Hirohito was the last divine king. It lasted in Japan up until Hirohito abdicated his divinity in 1945.
It just really blows my mind that people can be... I don't want to insult any particular divine king, but I saw a documentary on Hirohito, and people weren't allowed to look at him. When he rode down the street on his horse, people weren't allowed to see him with their own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that. I mean,
one of the books that made me the dangerous case that I am today was The Golden Bough by Sir James Frazer, which is a study in comparative religion in which you see what religions have in common and how they differ and how they come from a common origin and how this origin is really pretty weird stuff. And in there, he has a long list about the taboos on divine kings. Like in classical Japan, the emperor never touched the ground. The emperor was always carried. His feet never touched the ground. And there were laws against looking directly at the Inca also. As a matter of fact, marijuana was made illegal because it caused black people to look directly at white people. That was one of the reasons Anslinger gave Congress. He said, it destroys the mind. I have seen black people under the influence who look straight into a white man's eyes instead of looking down like they should. And Congress said, my God, we can't let this happen.
Well, that was in the 30s.
37.
You know. But in the 1917, the reason there were drug laws in 1917 against marijuana, right?
No, not until 37.
Not until 37?
Yeah.
Because
somehow this country survived for 150 years without any such law.
But they had just they completed a technological breakthrough that allowed marijuana stalks to be processed into paper very, very cheaply, and to make it more than competitive with forest tree paper. In fact, make it much, much more than competitive with tree paper. And the machinery having been completed that would make hemp paper back in style. Hemp paper which lasts a long time. Hemp paper which doesn't need dioxin, a poison with no minimum dose to process it. Hemp paper which only takes 1/4 as much land to grow as trees, and hemp paper which replaces trees, making deforestation for paper completely unnecessary. Hemp paper which is attached to a plant which makes a seed which is the highest non-meat source of protein in the world. Hemp paper which is attached to a plant which refurbishes worn out and wiped out and destroyed soil. Hemp paper which it goes on and on. Anyway,
God, that's almost a poem. That was almost a poem. It reminded me of Heathcote Williams' great poem on the whales.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay,
that was beautiful.
I'll write it down. I'm writing now, so.
Well, good. The more the better. The reason we still have the Magna Carta is that it was written on hemp paper. The Irish Book of Kells still survives in the long room at Trinity Library, and that was done in the 8th century A.D. And it survives because it was written on hemp paper. Nowadays, these crappy books printed on wood paper fall apart in a couple of years.
The Constitution was printed on hemp paper.
Pure hemp.
The Bill of Rights.
The Bill of Rights is on hemp
paper.
Well, the Bill of Rights is void where prohibited by law. Everybody knows that.
Did I read in one of your books about the poll taken among college students, and they were shown the Bill of Rights, not with that title, but just the amendments to the Bill of Rights, and a majority of them thought that was a lousy idea to put these laws into
This
action.
has been done several times, this research. It started during World War I. A sociologist began to worry about the anti-German hysteria in this country, which was not directed against Germany alone, but against Americans of German ancestry. And it had a lot of witch hunt overtones about it. And he took a copy, he sent his students out with copies of the Bill of Rights to ask people if they approved of it, and the majority overwhelmingly rejected it. And in the 20s, somebody said, well, that was wartime hysteria, so they repeated the study, and the majority rejected it again. And this has been repeated several times. The Bill of Rights is a philosophy that is not congenial to the majority. It gives them liberty, which they are not prepared for and don't want, and especially they don't want anybody else to have, especially the people they don't like. The Bill of Rights is a very intellectual, Freemasonic, libertine document. Only a bunch of philosophical aristocrats could have come up with something like that. Ordinary people don't like it at all. They just got stuck with it because the founders of this country were a bunch of intellectual aristocrats and Freemasons.
They were Freemasons.
Oh, yes.
I know every president of the United States up to Kennedy was a Mason.
And you saw what happened to him.
Yeah, but I don't know what happened after Kennedy. Do you know about the
Nixon was a Mason, Ford was a Mason, Jimmy Carter was a Mason, Ronald Reagan was a Mason. Apparently George Bush isn't, but he's in Skull and Bones.
That's higher than the Masons, right?
I don't know what Skull and Bones is, but it sure sounds intriguing, doesn't it?
So every president except from George Washington through Bush, except probably Bush and for Kennedy, has been a Mason. Now, is this is this the organization running the country?
It's one of the organizations attempting to run the country. There are about 24 groups that are all trying to run the country. Very few of them have front names, hind names, and addresses known to the general public.
Could you name some of those groups? We're looking for somebody that we can call up, says, hi, George, have a meeting next Thursday and stop the spraying. Thanks, like that.
Well, there's the Council on Foreign Relations, which is funded by the Rockefellers and more or less represents the interest of the Eastern banking families.
20 people went to John D. Rockefeller's funeral.
20?
20. He was the most hated man in the world.
No, Ty Cobb was.
Oh, that was before my time.
The Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Mafia, the Catholic Church, the Protestant Fundamentalists, the Freemasons, the Bilderbergers, the ACLU, the pot smugglers, the Eastern Establishment writers, the California anarchist writers. Probably there's at least 100 groups.
Hollywood, would you say?
Of course, Hollywood is trying to take over the country.
So we're a result of this fighting among these different groups and philosophies.
Well, that's evolution. We're the result of continuous dialectical struggle on all levels.
Are any of these groups using quantum rationality?
That's an interesting question. The Aquarian conspiracy, as Marilyn Ferguson calls it, a lot of them are aware of quantum logic and quantum philosophy.
I mean, you'd say in generally in evolution, if you are relating to reality in the most precise way, then you are bound to win. Right?
No, there's not that much certainty in anything. The odds are in your favor.
Okay, the odds are in your favor. So we would look for, say, the New Age movement, and I have some books and tapes again, of people who are really very intense enemies of the New Age movement. But they would, you would guess, be, if they are more in tune with reality, then they would evolve and flower as a leading philosophy direction in the country or in the world, on the planet.
Who would?
The New Age movement, the quantum rationality. People that don't say is.
I think what Marilyn Ferguson called the Aquarian conspiracy, which is kind of a synergy of some New Age ideas and some radical science and some green philosophy from Europe and some pop ecology and some real ecology and quantum logic and the revival of utopianism after it seemed to be totally dead in intellectual circles. All of that makes up a kind of affinity group that exists all around the world. I was in Oslo a couple of years ago, and I was astonished at how many Norwegian futurists think and talk and act just like the futurists around Los Angeles.
What about the Swedish futurists? And do they get chased by the Norwegian futurists?
The Norwegians and the Swedes gave up chasing each other a couple of 100 years ago. But they do still tell the story about the fellow who escaped from home for the retarded in Norway and was found teaching college in Sweden.
This is KPFK Los Angeles. We're on the air with Robert Anton Wilson. And should we find out what listeners have to ask?
Okay, maybe we can talk about Masks of the Illuminati a little. We've been talking about quantum psychology.
Okay, well, I'll just warn people. Quantum psychology is not a thick book, but it's slow going. It's filled with information, and it's quite challenging. Masks of the Illuminati is sort of a novel. There's 3 suicides that are talked about in really. I haven't read the whole book yet. There's 3 suicides that are talked about in relation to the Loch Ness. It's not the Loch Ness monster, but
yes,
the Loch Ness
monsters.
Monsters. Is that based on historical fact?
I never tell.
You never tell.
In my novels, I leave it up to the readers to figure out what's true and what's my imagination. I think that's part of the fun. It might encourage them to do some research or even some original thinking. Now, I like the kind of novel. I thought I invented it, and then I started realizing I got a lot of this style from H.P. Lovecraft, who liked to mix real books and fake books together in the same paragraph, so you didn't know when he was quoting real authorities and when he was making it up. And I got a lot of this from James Joyce, who in Ulysses has about 100 different narrators, all of whom give you a different version of what happened, which seems appropriate to me for the post-Einstein quantum age that we're living in, and the growing merging of Eastern and Western thinking, because the Buddhists have always thought this way.
I got the feeling of Steppenwolf. Because here you have...
Well, I don't mind being compared to Hermann Hesse.
The protagonist, at least he's a protagonist at the point where I'm reading, he's interested in these ancient orders and whether they still exist in the 20th century. And he started off just as an academic presentation of this, and now he's beginning to get involved with people who are involved in these things. And I have the same feeling as I did with the Steppenwolf, riding along with somebody as they start delving into mysteries.
I think this is funnier than Steppenwolf. I hope. Well, a lot of readers have thought it was quite a funny book. And it's also quite scary as it goes along. I think it does sort of tend to create a case of acute anxiety before you get through with it.
So you have to finish the book if you start it.
Well, that's my hope, yes.
And if you don't finish the book, then you probably have to go to a psychologist. Or no, you can read quantum psychology and work
cure
your way
yourself
out of
of the Mask of the Illuminati. That's the idea. My fiction puts people into terrible mental states of uncertainty, and my nonfiction shows them how to live with it.
Okay, well, we're going to take some phone calls. If you have any questions or demands of Robert Anton Wilson, we're at area code 818-985-5735, 985-KPFK. Hello?
Yes, so Robert, could you speak a little bit about the role of psychedelics and psychedelic thinking and the incredible things that have been happening in Eastern Europe and other parts of the world right about now? What I'm referring to is
Gorby acid.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I was. What I was referring to was a little article I saw that you had printed in a magazine, and it had to do with the Gorby acid that was going around Europe.
Yeah, I read that article on the program.
Was that was Robert Anton Wilson's article, wasn't it?
Yes. Unfortunately, I know absolutely nothing about psychedelics in the Eastern Bloc. That article was about the popularity of a new brand of acid in Western Europe, which had Gorby's picture on it. And I thought it was an interesting historical note. It's the first time a ruler of Soviet Russia has got his picture on acid. And I also wondered how long it would take before George Bush ever got his picture on acid.
Maybe that's what they're taking in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, maybe some of the Gorby acid is getting over there.
And it would be actually more realistic since Alan Dulles brought in how many gallons or tons of LSD during the 60s. It was really a CIA operation. In addition to whatever else it was that too.
Oh, yes, the CIA was doing LSD research from the early 50s on and keeping it all very secret and botching it all, too. The result of LSD is, as Leary pointed out way back at the beginning of the 60s, the result depends on the set and the setting, as well as the dosage. And the CIA was giving acid to people in a set and setting guaranteed to produce paranoia. So they had a memorable series of freakouts, some of whom are still trying to sue the government for the damage that was done to them.
And some deaths.
Some deaths, too.
Hello?
Hello. Hello, Robert. First of all, a minor comment or an observation that there's another author, I don't know if he's a competitor on the subject of writing with relativity to the fraternal organizations, but there's a guy whose name is Stan Deo, and he's about ready to come out with a book. I think it's related to that, called The Vindicator Scrolls, but he already has one book out called The Cosmic Conspiracy. Are you familiar with that? And if you are, do you think he has gone overboard in the way he ties together the relationship between that and politics and religion?
Well, I may have to leave early tonight. I'm starting to feel like even more like an idiot than I usually do. First question was about the use of acid in a part of the world I haven't been in and know nothing about. Now, this is a question about a book I haven't read, and I'm sorry.
Well, he's an Australian.
I'm very ignorant of a lot of things.
Well, that's a good exit for you to bow out of that question. That's okay,
Won't
though.
somebody call and ask me a question I can answer?
Well, the following will not be so much as a question for you to answer necessarily. It'll be a comment. I thought maybe earlier you were referring to the proposed legislation to modify the rights of jurors. Well, there's another law who already has passed, which is, if not more so, at least equally threatening to the rights of people, namely Public Law 100-690 or H.R. 5210. Now, this law is very interesting since it's already been passed. And, for instance, this law, this act, mandates now, of course, this is the United States Congress, right? Mandating in the act the establishment of a world currency control system, and this would be an international database to analyze currency transactions. What gives the right of the United States Congress to mandate a world currency control system? But don't answer me that yet. Now, the next thing is, Congress ordered by this act that the Attorney General shall study the feasibility of prosecuting federal drug-related offenses in a manner alternative or supplemental to the current criminal justice system. Quote. Do you have any ideas of what the alternative might be?
Well, it certainly sounds sinister. So does the first part of it, that International Currency Data Bank.
Mm-hmm. This law has been passed. Also, this
Maybe we can get the international community to pay the SNL ripoff bill.
Well, as long as enough
and
people,
they have a feature of the law that may apply to that very thing. Namely, this act calls for a study of the feasibility of establishing an international criminal court. This act mandates that the military installations are to be used as mental treatment centers or prison camps with work programs. And I'll close off with the even more blow your mind thing than all the above. It further requires the utilization of existing government laboratory facilities, parentheses, the DoD, Justice, Energy, and National Security Agency, CIA, etc., to research technologies of law enforcement, which are not limited to drug enforcement. And some of the categories of research and development would be night vision, ground sensor and communication electronics, physical electronic security, imaging electronic surveillance, chemical/biosensor research and development, chemical/molecular research, physical/electronic surveillance and tracking. Now, earlier you stated what this FBI has been known to do, or the CIA has been known to do with LSD in areas that are relative to some of those categories, and of course we know that they probably bowed out of that, but now they have better things that they're going to look into. Interesting, isn't it?
Interesting is a mild word. Depressing, frightening, nightmarish,
well, I'm sure a creative
Kafkaesque.
writer like you should come up with really something psychedelic to say about it. Okay, Robert, keep up the good work.
Well, as I was saying earlier, the government can't enforce any laws that are repugnant to the majority of the people if jurors are fully informed of their rights. I think that's the last hope, because I used to have hope from the Supreme Court back when Black was still alive and Brennan hadn't resigned. Now I've given up all hope on the Supreme Court, so the last hope I see is a fully informed jury.
Hello?
Oh, hello. First of all, Bob, be with you. Bob of the Church of the Subgenius.
I must have slack.
We must have slack. All right. My question is, first of all, would you like to buy some stock in the Mustang Ranch? Okay. All right, I'm a stockbroker, but my next question is, I'm looking for a copy of Nature's God. Is there such an animal as Nature's God?
Well, I
mean,
I'm sorry, I can't.
We got the widow's son.
You know, besides doing radio appearances, I do a lot of lectures. I've heard that question so many times and answered it so many times. I feel like I'm in one of those surrealist films where the same thing keeps happening over and over. The publisher of the publisher of the first two volumes of the historical series had Nature's God printed, sent me the covers, which I have hanging in my workroom, and then they went bankrupt. And we had to find another publisher, and I'm very, very happy to say the new publisher is New American Library. But that means that although I'll be getting more money for the series, the readers have to wait another year before they'll see the book.
I gotta wait another year.
I'm sorry.
I've been going crazy. I went to all these bookstores, and they all had it listed in the computers and in all the stuff, and I went wild, and I thought, this just like adds to the heart of hearts of conspiracy. And so I guess you've answered my question. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Bob. This is Dave Krieger from Star Trek.
Hi, Dave.
Maybe we corresponded a bit. Maybe not. Anyway, are you familiar with the book The Cuckoo's Egg, which is about West German hackers, and in particular the connection of one of them with the Illuminatus trilogy?
Oh, yes. What was his name? Klaus Koch?
Yes.
Yeah, he... He identified very much with Hagbard Chalene, which is not surprising. Almost all readers of the book identify with Hagbard. I identify with Hagbard part of the time myself. And Klaus set out to play games with the CIA and the KGB from his home computer and managed to scare the hell out of the scientific intelligence establishment in this country. I don't know how much he shook up the KGB. That has not come clear yet. And he apparently committed suicide on April 23rd when he was 23 years old. And that is such a weird and eldritch note for a fan of Illuminatus that it makes me wonder whether I know when I'm writing fiction and when I'm writing fact. Maybe I'm a channel without knowing it. But there's a lot of interesting crackers who are not quite as flamboyant as Klaus Koch was. Last issue of Reality Hackers said a virus to invade the IRS and destroy files selectively or collectively is bound to be in place within 2 years. I think those people know pretty well what's going on in the hacker community.
Are you aware of the Electronic Frontier Foundation that was recently founded by Mitch Caper and Steve Wozniak?
No, it's
they're working to secure constitutional protection for electronic media, and this was prompted by Operation Sun Devil, which was the United States Secret Service crackdown on some hackers. They raided, in some of the cases they were fairly preposterous, they raided a role-playing game company called Steve Jackson Games and confiscated all of the materials for a game they were producing called Cyberpunks, which had very little factual information on hacking, but which the Secret Service was not competent to determine whether or not there was any practical information included in the manual for the game. And they've also cracked down on the editor of a phone hacking newsletter that was being published. And the Electronic Frontier Foundation is an organization that was founded to assist the victims of Operation Sun Devil and to help to sort of chart the laws of cyberspace and to try and civilize it a little bit and to secure protections similar to those under the First Amendment, or to extend First Amendment protections to electronic forms of publishing. Because at the moment, with a search warrant, a law enforcement agency can exercise prior restraint by seizing computers, which are in fact the printing presses of electronic publishers.
Yes, I sometimes think that as the Eastern Bloc nations move toward a libertarian society and pick up on the ideas that were born in this country in the 18th century, this country seems to be moving in the direction of Stalinism. It gets more and more like Russia under Stalin. Not even under Brezhnev, but under Stalin. There was a case recently where a captain in Alaska had his ship seized because one crewman had one marijuana cigarette in his pocket. And this man is quoted in the newspaper as saying, "I've lost $38,000 so far from not having my boat during the halibut season, and I haven't been charged with any crime yet." They took the man's boat away, destroyed his livelihood, and they have no charges against him whatsoever. Now, it's hard to believe anything like that could happen outside Nazi Germany or Stalin's Russia. So it does seem this country is moving in to fill the void as totalitarianism collapses elsewhere. Apparently this country is fated to take up the slack, as it were, and become the #1 totalitarian country in the world.
Is there any place you can recommend yet for emigration?
Iceland, Ireland, Sweden, Denmark, Nederland, especially Nederland. You'll love Amsterdam. Everybody does.
Okay, thanks for coming on the radio tonight, Bob, and I'm looking forward very much to Cosmic Trigger, too, which you might say a few words about in passing. I've heard about it. Is that going to be available soon?
That'll be out sometime next year.
Okay.
Along with my 3 historical novels, the 2 that have already been published and the one that got aborted when the original publisher went bankrupt, and a screenplay by me is being published by Dell. It's called Reality is What You Can Get Away With. It's sort of a Monty Python-style introduction to neurology.
You don't have suffer from writer's block, I take it.
No, I've never had a serious case of writer's block. I don't believe in writer's block. You never hear of plumber's block or a dentist's block or a gynecologist's block or anything. Why should writers get blocked?
Hello?
Hello. I'm on, actually, huh?
You are on the air right now.
They cut you off every time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The phone, we don't answer. We answer your call on the phone. I mean, on the air.
No, I mean,
so the phone company cuts off. If you ring for more than a few minutes, the phone company will cut off the line. So you have to call again.
Well, let's see. First, how are you, Mr. Wilson? Asked the Puka.
I just saw that movie again about 2 nights
Did
ago.
I?
One of my favorite movies.
I felt an obligation to fulfill a minor fractal. In April, you appeared at Esoterica Bookstore in New York City, and my friend asked you at that time to write a birthday note for me, which you graciously did, and he sent to me, and then now I'll probably send him this tape, so it'll be a minor synchronicity again. So thank you very much for the birthday note.
It's all one seamless unity.
That's right. And
See, you don't need Alan Watts every night. Somebody else can say it, too.
it also struck me funny you mentioning offhandedly before Ty Cobb, the most hated man in the world, when the big news story of today, if you on network news, is George Steinbrenner going through the same thing. Have you heard about that?
No,
Yeah, George Steinbrenner of the Yankees has been the commissioner of baseball has banned him from baseball. So he has to actually, I think he has to actually give up the team.
I think they should start a hall of infamy. And this would be for great baseball players who everybody loves, even though they've committed major felonies. There would be, of course, a statue of Shoeless Joe Jackson right outside.
Was as thorough as the baseball's justice system?
Well, in America, we don't believe in buying and selling human beings except athletes. And once you've got a system like that in place, you got all the other corruption that comes with slavery.
By the way, will you be announcing the address of your newsletter, and could you be written at that address?
I thought you'd never ask.
Yes.
Yeah, anybody who would like to learn more about my newsletter, or get a complete list of all of my books in print offered through the Robert Anton Wilson bookstore by mail at prices lower than you'd pay in the regular bookstores. All of this you can get by writing to, have you got your pens and paper ready?
We're all set.
Okay, Post Office, Permanent Press, Post Office Box 700-305. That's 700-305, San Jose, California.
And the cancer capital of the world.
Don't distract me while I'm trying to do the zip code. 95170. San Jose is the only city in the country where being bilingual means you speak both Spanish and Vietnamese.
Thanks so much for all that you're doing, Robert.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello?
Hi, Roy, and hi, Robert. I have a few points of interest regarding hemp paper. I heard this on Philosopher's Stone that the Eli Lilly Company has the only patent for bonding paper. And George Bush is on the board of directors. He was the vice president, and Danny Quayle's father is the chairman of the board.
One big happy family.
The Eli Lilly Company also produces the chemicals for making cocaine. They export it down to these countries that make it, and they also produce spike, which is used to destroy the coca plant. So Mr. Bush is getting it all ways.
Talking about one big happy family, do you listen to this show regularly enough to be familiar with the name John Hull?
Oh, definitely.
As John Hull is under indictment in Costa Rica for murder and various conspiracies connected with drugs and guns. John Hull was introduced to Ollie North by guess who?
Who?
J. Danforth Quayle, who nobody had heard of at that point.
Oh, yes.
Well, Bush told us, look at who I select for vice president. That will tell you all about me.
Yeah. I also heard John Hull's in El Salvador now running some kind of right-wing supposed religious group that's being used to supposedly pacify the military and pacify villages. And I wonder what they mean by pacify.
Well, I was once in the eastern part of this state, which I seldom go into, and I was being driven by some friends to give a lecture, and we stopped to get a drink along the way, and we were right next to the Republican campaign headquarters, and in the window they had a picture of a record they were selling. It was Ronald Reagan with 4 cute little kids looking up at him adoringly, and the Bible open in his hands, and it was entitled, President Reagan Reads Bible Stories to Children. Now, you know, people like that are capable of anything.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for being on there, and see you Tuesday night, Roy and Diane.
Okay, we're at the Michael Benner's group.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello.
Good evening, Roy, and hello, Robert.
Hello.
Robert, I wanted to talk to you about the mind machines. I've read some of your articles in a magazine called Magical Blend, and you write extensively about these, and you wrote about the Polestar, a machine which is no longer available, and I was wondering if what you said once on KPFK was that you had this machine, and that you had set it down to, roughly 4 hertz, and you were able to astral travel or leave your body, so to speak. Is this correct?
Well, the machine that the Polestar that went down to 4 hertz did not belong to me. It belonged to the inventor of the Polestar, Michael Hercules. And what I said was that when he asked me to attempt astral projection, I experienced myself as leaving the laboratory, leaving Colorado, leaving the United States, going over the North Pole, finding Ireland, and going back to the house I was living in Ireland at that time. And then coming back over the North Pole and finding the Rocky Mountains, and then finding Boulder and getting back into the laboratory and my body. That is what I experienced.
Fantastic.
Phenomenologically. What was actually happening is a question that's probably meaningless. All questions with what was generally meaningless. The thing that I found interesting is not that I had the experience, which I've had other times, that sort of experience, but that Mike Hercules, the inventor of the Polestar, made an EEG during that, and I had flat lines.
No brainwaves at all?
No brainwaves at all, and I found that very interesting.
It certainly is. That's almost like one of those yogi states that these guys go in and lower their heartbeats.
Yes, it's one of the most striking confirmations I've ever had that altered states of consciousness not only can produce interesting readings, but sometimes produce readings that absolutely cannot be explained within current paradigms.
Uh-huh. I recently bought one of these machines. It's called the Brain Tuner, put out by Dr. Bob Beck. And this thing is not, it's not a low-frequency device. It's a rather high-frequency device, and it tunes up the neurotransmitters in the brain, kind of like tuning up a car to get it operating efficiently. Now, it's okay to put you in a pretty clear state, but it doesn't bring you down low enough to be able to do these kind of out-of-body things. And I was wondering, there's a new machine that Mike Hercules put out. It's $299, and it's called the New Star. Do you know anything about that?
I haven't tried it, but I hear it's an improvement over the Polestar.
Yeah, I'm thinking of purchasing it. All right, I want to thank you for your information, and I've got all your books. I've read a lot of them, and I just keep on writing.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good evening.
One of the exercises in quantum psychology for groups that are studying this is to do some extrasensory and psychokinesis experiments, and then to spend some time with one of these brainwave instruments and go down to 4 hertz, and then after spending some time in 4 hertz, then doing under those conditions PK and ESP experiments.
Yes, I did several of those with Mike Hutchison in Germany last year. We did several seminars where we played a 4 hertz repeating wave and had people try to guess what was inside a locked box, which neither Mike nor I knew, so they couldn't be doing it by reading our minds. We wanted to rule out ESP and go for something really sensational, which was something related to our, quote, out-of-body experience, unquote, because they had to see inside the box to get the right answer.
Did it work?
We got results above chance. It was enough to make us extremely interested and want to see more such research.
Hello?
Hello. I was curious in all of Mr. Wilson's research whether he had found anything out about the Skull and Bone Society that George Bush purportedly belongs to.
No, all I know is what was in Doonesbury. The rumor that they have the skull of Geronimo and various other famous skulls. I don't know whether there's any truth in that or not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good night. Hello?
Yes, I wondered if you, let's see, is it off? Yeah, no, it's off. Okay. Did you ever hear of Francis Chris Welsing, and do you believe that maybe we should be talking about quite a bit game plans we can say out in the public like this instead of just saying bad news, which is okay to some point, but to another point you have to think of solutions, not just the problems. Francis Chris Welsing is a black Afro-American psychiatrist. She's a pillar of the Afro-American community. If you don't like what she says, at least you have the Afro-American community to answer to.
What?
Thank you.
What did he say?
Hello?
Hello, let me turn my radio off. I don't know what he said. I have several questions, and I wanted to let you guys know. You brought up the fishing scow up in the North Pacific. About 5 or 6 months ago, the Customs Service, the Coast Guard, stopped the Scripps Oceanography ship off the coast of Hawaii, and they boarded it and searched it for drugs. And a very similar situation happened out of that whole ship. What they found was one joint by an ordinary seaman, and they seized the ship.
Well, they did that with the Glomar Explorer. It's a like $60 million special vessel that Howard Hughes developed, and they went up ostensibly looking for drug shipments, and while looking for massive drug shipments, they opened up a shaving kit and found like a pinch or a joint or something, and they took the Glomar Explorer. It was a $60 million vessel, approximately.
Well, in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh owned everything. Everybody was just a tenant or a lessee of whatever. The pharaoh officially owned everything. And maybe that's what George Bush is aiming at. Because the next step beyond this idiocy with ships and cars and so on is they bust an apartment in an apartment house, so they seize the whole apartment house from the landlord. That's no sillier than seizing a ship from a captain because one sailor had a joint. So they can seize whole blocks of apartment houses next, and then they can seize a whole city if they find somebody getting high in the public park. and pretty soon George Bush will own everything. Maybe that's what this is
They
all
could take
about.
a state. Then they only have to find 50 people, and they'll be able to turn over as private property to themselves all 50 states.
Have either of you ever been to the Bohemian Grove?
Sure, I go all the time.
Especially you, Roy, because you ride bikes. And it's in a biker town on the Russian River, and it's the scuzziest town, and yet that's the place where all these Republican bohos go to meet, right? And I always thought it was a real strange juxtaposition. The question I have to end this is George Bush our last president? You think he'll just stay in office ad infinitum?
Well, the alternative is Dan Quayle.
No, I mean because...
Bush has the greatest life insurance and impeachment insurance any president in history could imagine. There's already a T-shirt out with Munch's famous painting, The Scream. Mm-hmm. You know, the two faces, one bigger than the other, both of them screaming. It really looks like an echo on canvas of sheer terror. And it says, President Quayle?
Well, I was just thinking that now that the national security state is in place and the chief spy is the president, why would they take the chance of anybody else getting in?